10 teams made changes at head coach this offseason, which is tied for the most ever. But forgotten amidst the chaos of this coaching cycle are 4 more teams that I think should have considered making a change too. If any one of them had, it would have set a new record. Now, I don't take joy in people losing their jobs. That part of the industry sucks. But I do think 4 coaches in particular need to be put under the microscope, and that they will be on the hot seat very soon if they aren't already. Today, I'm going to give arguments on both sides, both why the teams are justified for keeping these coaches, but also why they should have considered moving on, and then you'll hear where I ultimately fall with each coach. You're watching Light Boxes, a football show that helps you think outside the box about the NFL. I'm your host, Rob Ballantine. It would mean the world to me if you liked the video, left a comment on it, and clicked subscribe to this channel. Doing all those things really helps grow this community and bring in more NFL fans just like you. All right, let's dig into it. Before I go coach by coach, I will say that an argument for keeping all of them is that it's already a crowded market. There are so many openings out there. Here are all the coaches who were fired either mid-season or this offseason and how long they were with the team. Why compete in this already crowded pool when the market isn't full of top-tier coaching candidates anyway? Here's who all those teams have hired since, and it's not an entirely inspiring list of names, and the Raiders and Cardinals still don't even have coaches yet. So the 4 teams I'm going to talk about were probably prudent to stick with their guy, but I still think these guys need to be examined, and that they'll likely be the next to go. The most obvious place to start is in Cincinnati, with Bengals coach Zac Taylor. He was the only coach in the AFC North to keep his job for 2026. They obviously retained him because the Bengals owners are notoriously cheap, and Taylor is still under contract. They're unwilling to eat the money of a fired head coach in the way most franchises are. To me, that's not a valid reason to keep him. The best actual argument for Zac Taylor is that his offensive ecosystem works. That doesn't sound like the strongest of praise, and you'd want Zac Taylor's offense to be more on the cutting edge, to provide more of a schematic advantage. But this offense empowers its players, and when it works, it goes blow for blow with any of the other best teams in the league. This team made the Super Bowl 4 years ago with Taylor as the architect of its offense. Just 2 years ago, when Joe Burrow goes down with a torn ligament in his wrist, Jake Browning comes in, Taylor coaches him up, and they're able to get a 4-3 record out of those games, including Jake Browning in the offense putting up more than 30 points in 3 of those games. Midway through this year, Joe Burrow goes down again. Jake Browning is not able to keep the team afloat. The team trades for Joe Flacco, and Zac Taylor quickly puts together a potent offense with Flacco at the helm. Now, any one of these successful periods could be an accident on its own, but not all of them in totality. There's something to him as an offensive play caller and coach. So why move on then? Well, I think his inattention to the defensive side of the ball is truly worrisome. I don't think Taylor has a vision for what he wants the Bengals to be on that side of the ball, as demonstrated by bringing back a former linebackers coach in Al Golden to be the defensive coordinator this offseason. Familiarity can be a good thing, but I think that was a big driving factor behind the move. Golden's defense had no teeth, no structure, no hallmarks, no identity. Now, good offensive-minded head coaches, they might not know how to call a defense, but they're intentional with the type of leader and the type of system that they want shaping the other side of the ball. Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota hiring Brian Flores. Ben Johnson in Chicago hiring Dennis Allen. And that's a really good analog here because the Bears defense, similar to the Bengals, lacked firepower. But the Bears unit came through when the team needed it to because of the coaching. Golden's Cincy defense had no backbone to it. And then there were the culture issues. These are the biggest problem. You see defensive players constantly throwing their hands up in frustration when their teammates make mistakes. Or offensive players going to the media to voice their gripes. You heard Jamar Chase make passive-aggressive hints at it, but then Chase Brown took an absolute flamethrower to the defense with his comments after the Bengals collapsed to the Bears 47-42 at home in Week 9. Now, these are just not signs of a team that's banded together, of a locker room that trusts itself, and that falls at the feet of the head coach, Zac Taylor. I think it's pretty clear where I stand. Zach Taylor should have been relieved of his duties this offseason, and he's going to need a hell of a 2026 campaign if he's going to avoid that fate next year. Todd Bowles of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is another one I would have considered. The argument for him is mostly based on continuity. The Bucs have never had an outstanding record under Bowles, but he led them to 3 consecutive NFC South titles before barely missing out on a 4th this year. He facilitated the transition from Tom Brady's final year to the Baker Mayfield era. He made 2 fantastic OC hires in Dave Canales in 2023 and Liam Cohen in 24, both of whom got head coaching gigs of their own right after 1 year successfully leading the Bucs offense. His choice of promoting Josh Grizzard to OC in 2025 didn't work out, and it's part of why the Bucs had a down year. But they also battled more injuries than usual and were relying on contributions from a lot of young players, particularly rookies in the secondary, and that can take time. So the argument for him is that this was just one down year. But the reason to move on from Bowles is the defensive head coach dilemma. One of the best ways to ensure success year over year is to maintain a consistent and evolving relationship between your quarterback and your offensive play caller. When that offensive play caller is your head coach, they will never leave the building. But since Bowles is a defensive head coach, all of the good OCs that he employs will quickly leave for head coaching opportunities elsewhere, just like Canales and Cohen did, thus leading to offensive instability. Now, defensive head coaches can work, but they have to provide a monumental edge in a different area. They have to be elite at defensive scheming, or at teaching technique, or at inspiring players, or at game management, something like that. Now, you look at the Seahawks' Mike Macdonald and the Patriots' Mike Vrabel and the Texans' D'Amico Ryans. They're elite in multiple of these areas. They've built programs that can withstand offensive coaching turnover. I'm not sure Bowles is able to do that. He doesn't clear that line for me. His game management and his ability to inspire are average at best. And while his defense is solid, I don't think it's enough to offset what you're losing on the offensive side of the ball. Teams understand this dilemma well because with the Raiders and Cardinals jobs still open and John Harbaugh of the Giants coming from a special teams background, that means with the other 29 head coaches, 20 of them are offensive minded and only 9 of them are defensive. And I just don't think Bowles has proven enough to be one of those 9. But with all that said, I still think it might have been right to stick with Bowles in this case. 1, because of the aforementioned crowded market for coaching services. But 2, the NFC South is super weak. That is a winnable division, which he's won before. So you might as well maintain continuity, ride it out for 1 more year, see if you can get another division title that way. Then evaluate it in 2027. Next, I want to investigate the Jets sticking with Aaron Glenn after going 3-14. The easiest argument for him, he's only had 1 year to turn around a rebuilding team, and that's not enough time for him to put in his program. But plenty of coaches are let go after 1 year when it's clear they're in over their heads. Most recently, Pete Carroll also went 3-14 this season in his first year with the Raiders, and he was let go. The Raiders were special levels of futile, though. So you keep Glenn, and you let him develop his program into 2026. But what exactly is his program? For me, it's been rooted in incompetence and irrationality. I don't like that he and the GM, a GM who was hired after Glenn, by the way, made the decision to overpay Justin Fields, make him the quarterback and the face of the new Jets era. I don't like that Glenn was combative with reporters when they asked him about a brewing QB competition midway through the season, nor when he was combative with them over Garrett Wilson's season-ending injury. I don't like that he got the ball with 3 minutes and 22 seconds left in the first half of the Broncos game in London, a game that they were losing 10-6. They ran 10 plays, including a successful fake punt, but then didn't spike the ball, didn't show any urgency to try to gain another 20 or so yards to get into long field goal range and cut the lead to 1. This is a game that they lost 13-11, by the way, so those 3 points, they were the difference. And I don't like that he spent this offseason firing 7 of his assistant coaches over the course of 3 weeks. Now, losing 7 assistants, make it 8 with DC Steve Wilks fired during the season. Losing 8 assistants in a season is astronomical. But to do it right when the season ends, to understand that this wasn't working and we're just going to move on and completely clean house, that would have made a bit more sense. But doing it over the course of 3 weeks, first demoting OC Tanner Engstrand and then losing him entirely, that just shows indecision and grasping at straws for answers. It doesn't show a head coach who's in command of steering this ship. When the Detroit Lions, Glenn's former team, when they were bad in 2021 in Dan Campbell's first year as head coach, you still felt positive vibes and consistent messaging coming out of that coaching staff and out of the locker room. You felt players who were appreciated and wanted to be a part of turning this thing around. Those were the bedrock of what the Lions would become now. And I'm not certain that the 2025 Jets season is going to be looked upon that way. I think it's been a mess. However, I think you stick with Glenn for one more year. I do think that was the correct choice. I am rooting for Glenn. He seems like a really good guy, a good leader when the situation is right. And this situation might be notably wrong. Right? It's the New York Jets. Their ownership is meddlesome at best and undermining at worst. And so maybe no one can succeed in this environment. But I would stick with Glenn, not only because I'm rooting for him, but also the Jets don't have a path to a top-tier quarterback prospect in this draft. Fernando Mendoza's going 1, and Dante Moore decided to go back to college, so there's nobody obvious to pick at 2. If there was, you might try pairing that quarterback with a new coach. But since there's not, you give Glenn one more year to try to show some signs of life. And then, if he doesn't, you clean house and bring in a new quarterback and coach for 2027. My last one will feel controversial to some, because until the Seahawks and Patriots game is decided, this is the reigning Super Bowl champion head coach. I think the Eagles' Nick Sirianni needs a serious look. And of course, his recent Super Bowl ring and another Super Bowl appearance in the 2022 season are the primary grounds for keeping him. It doesn't matter how talented the roster was and how strong his coordinators were at the time. Winning 2 NFC titles and a Super Bowl doesn't just happen by accident. If I had to point to one thing he does well, it's game management. I rarely see him botch his usage of timeouts and challenges. He's willing to go for it on 4th down and attempt 2-point conversions. His commitment to the tush-push hasn't been fun for fans, but it was a winning strategy for them in 2024. But Sirianni's main selling point back when the Eagles were winning was the energy and good vibes that he brought. Yet the 2025 Eagles probably had the worst vibes of any 11-6 team in history. Well, maybe it's the 11-6 2023 Eagles, also coached by Sirianni. And that's the problem. It's just peaks and valleys with him. 2022, Super Bowl appearance. 2023, first-round exit. 2024, Super Bowl win. 2025, first-round exit. He is an extremely volatile person emotionally, and that's not a characteristic you want in your head coach. And the team follows suit. Sirianni's unbridled energy, it's a double-edged sword. First used in defense of his players, and then used to completely alienate them. And Sirianni's rift with quarterback Jalen Hurts is very concerning. And I know, Jalen Hurts has his own warts. He's probably not a top 10 quarterback, but he's still your franchise guy. And he's notably been a hard worker throughout his career. If you look back at Alabama, he's been known to be extremely coachable. And then in the beginning of his time with the Eagles, you saw him grow. So it's possible he got too big for his britches after winning the Super Bowl, but I think it's much more likely that Nick Sirianni is a particularly grating head coach who has lost his main player. Sirianni can no longer connect with Hurts. And since he doesn't provide a schematic edge as one of the coordinators, nor does he seem capable of motivating his team anymore, well, what would you say you do here? I think it's so clear that the Eagles are not going to win another Super Bowl with Sirianni unless the roster and the rest of the coaching staff are damn near perfect, just like they were in 2024. If that's the case, fine, but since it's so unlikely, I would rather try something new. Find somebody who can provide you an edge elsewhere. And hopefully somebody who doesn't contribute to a feedback loop of shit talking with the Philly fan base. Those are my picks for the guys next to be on the hot seat, if not already. If you thought there was anybody I missed, please drop a line in the comments. You may have noticed I left out Packers head coach Matt LaFleur. I think he's a really good coach, but if you don't, tell me why. Put it in the comments. Also, please like the video and subscribe to this channel. I really want to grow this community, and I want you to be a part of it. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Light Boxes. I'm Rob Ballantine, and I'll see you soon.